And we're live. Welcome to Music Matters with Jason Tramm. We're so excited that you can join us for our unique podcast community where we explore the issues and challenges of the musical world as seen through the eyes of distinguished colleagues. Thank you for joining us tonight. Please remember to subscribe to us on social media, subscribe on YouTube, and hit that bell for the most up-to-date information and upcoming guests and topics. Like and share our videos. We really appreciate it. We've been growing thanks to your listening and thanks to everyone out there. We really appreciate it. We've just hit the 820 subscriber mark on YouTube, over 1,500 likes on Facebook, and we just added Instagram, and we're excited, and it's really an honor to serve our musical colleagues and friends, so thank you so much. We have a wonderful guest tonight, concert pianist, very talented and dynamic, Maryam Raya, who's going to join us, and let's jump right in. Welcome, Maryam Raya.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And perfect pronunciation on the first try of my name. Thank you for that too.
Well, I'm glad I got that right. It's so important. So you've performed all over the world at this point, and performances in England, Spain, France, Italy, China, Estonia, Latvia, Finland, and Dubai, among others. And you've got degrees from the Eastman School, both undergrad and master's degree, and you've recently performed a concerto, Beethoven concerto in Carnegie Hall, so a very busy and active performing schedule.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
So why don't we jump into right to your playing? Why don't we take it back in time? Tell us about your artistic journey, how you started in music.
So I started from a very young age in music. My parents put me in a very interesting class for almost toddlers. I think I was maybe 3 or 4 at the time, called Music Mind Games. And we would basically learn about different rhythms by like saying like watermelon for 16th notes. And so it was just very kind of introductory, kind of cute music classes. And, my parents were always asking, okay, we wanted to learn a musical instrument. I mean, what is the best to start with? And everybody's just like piano. Like it's you can go anywhere from piano. It's, the most basic to start with. She doesn't have to stay with it. She can, do cello, violin in the future. So I started with piano when I was, I would say 5.5 to 6 years old. I was in a preparatory program, and it was, pretty normal until I was about 11. And I think I don't really remember a point where I, okay, just I want to become a concert pianist. Like that's the decision. It was kind of something like I literally couldn't see myself without the piano in front of me. Like the piano was literally in front of me, and it was going to be in front of me, figuratively speaking, for the rest of my life. So I can't really tell you when I made an actual decision, but I've been very lucky to feel that, this is my calling and this is my passion from a very early age.
Were your parents professional musicians?
Not at all, actually. My family, close family and extended family, they're all in the sciences and medicine. And my parents are huge music lovers. They did not get the opportunity themselves when they were young to take piano lessons or music lessons in general, which is why they were, so adamant, growing up here that I'm gonna have my daughter, have music, have arts, be, a part of her life. And, they especially were super interested in the fact that, everybody says, music enhances your cognitive development and enhances your education in other disciplines. And so that was absolutely very important to them.
So how old were you when you did your first public performance?
I was 9. I remember it very clearly. It was in a very beautiful chapel. My first piano teacher was the organist in that chapel, and every spring she would hold, studio recitals for her students, and I had a solo recital. It was in the fall. And I remember it extremely clearly because I played a Mozart sonata. And it was, of course, for me at that time, the most challenging, the most, I had worked on it for, all year. And this was my first performance, and I was very excited. And I just remember the feeling I had on stage of like, this experience is something that will never be replicated. And it's something that I'm sharing with so many people. It's almost like this experience is once in a lifetime, but also transcendental. And I've felt that with every single performance. But the first time, of course, it made a huge impression when I was 9 years old, was like, wow. I mean, I got off stage, and according to my mom, I told my mom, I'm gonna go back there. I'm gonna go back on stage. Like, this is what I'm gonna do.
And that
So
is magic. Isn't that the magic of performing? I know every time I sit in the dressing room, I do a lot of opera conducting or symphony conducting. But whenever I'm in the dressing room, I just say, I love this. I just love this energy. I'm about to get in front of the audience and make art happen. But every time I appreciate that so much, that time alone right before I get on the stage. It's magic.
it's incredible. And I think that when we're young, I don't want to necessarily say we're more confident, but because it's so new, it's every time there's this sense of curiosity and there's this openness, and there's this almost innocence about it that I think is so valuable at a young age, because it's something that I try, when you're performing more frequently and your career is kind of building and you're getting busier and busier as a performer, you always want to have that experience and those feelings that you had when you were super young. And you don't want to let that go away.
And keep that childlike innocence and love of your art form. You never want to lose that, right? That's, for me, is so important. And I find by teaching, I engage with younger people often. I always really, and I just love that energy of working with young conductors or working with young artists and veteran artists. You can learn. You always learn from your colleagues. It's such an amazing thing about music.
Definitely. Definitely.
So when you started the concert scene, what was it like, and what was the next step in your training and your development?
As a young teenager.
Sure.
So I entered a pre-college program where I was really privileged to take music theory and music history classes. So from a very early age, I was able to, make the relationship and make that, very informative to the way I played. And it was definitely serious, the education that I had. And then it was time to apply to conservatories, and I was super conflicted because there were classes in school that I really enjoyed. I was on an abbreviated schedule for piano in high school. So basically, I took essential classes, and instead of coming home at 3 o'clock, I came home at 12:30. So I would have a lot of time to, practice and that sort of thing. But I was conflicted because, in spite of that, in spite of sort of putting piano as such a priority, knowing that it was what I was going to do for the rest of my life, I still really especially enjoyed literature. I remember in 11th grade, I took AP English, and in 12th grade, I took AP English Literature, and I had the most fantastic teachers for those courses, and I enjoyed so much the discussions and learning from my peers, and it was just such an interactive environment that I ended up entering a dual degree program. I applied to both conservatories and universities, and that's what ended up happening. So in retrospect, I think it was a very good idea for me.
How does the literature feed the musical part of your personality and your artistry?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I talk a lot about program music. And of course, literature doesn't exclusively impact program music or affect program music or affect the interpretation of program music. But literature is very instrumental in the fact that many composers have been inspired by literary works to write their music. And so if you don't know the literature, or the poem, I should say, actually, the work I have in mind is, poetry, then you, of course, you can play the music well. And of course, you might be able to give, a solid, good performance. But in terms of the substance, you're missing a lot, and you're missing on a lot of opportunity to really go deeper into the score. Aside from program music, I mentioned music in general, and that's because all arts have a sense of logic and a sense of structure. And that sense of logic and sense of structure is kind of going parallel. So, like, as literature is developing, like, for example, French literature and French music, it's developing in a similar way because they influence each other. And especially in, 19th and 20th centuries, these composers and these poets and these writers, they knew each other.
They were
And
all friends.
they were collaborating. Right. They were collaborating in the sense that, okay, not like maybe not an official collaboration, but collaborating in the sense that their thoughts were, kind of exchanged. And so there's a sense of the interconnectedness and the fact that you just cannot separate them that I think is really happening in the 21st century, honestly. I mean, I think people talk about it like it's something in the past, but especially with this pandemic, in a way, we're all connected online. And so it's a wonderful opportunity to sort of continue that tradition.
Who are some of your favorite writers and some of the, I see you're into metaphysical poetry. So who are some of your favorite poets?
I love metaphysical poetry. So I specialized in John Donne and Andrew Marvell, which is not really surprising because they're like basically the two main poets that made metaphysical poetry as a genre. What I like about metaphysical poetry especially is that it's actually meant to be narrated. It's not meant to just be read, it's meant to be spoken out loud. And in that way, excuse me, there's really a performative element where it's not like something that you just read and continue to analyze. It's something that is meant to be performed and experienced, and then that's the experience. As I mentioned, like one time, but at the same time completely transcendental. The second thing I like about metaphysical poetry is that it's very much characterized by these kind of associations that are bizarre and extremely creative. So it's like something about sitting, like very, very frank, and then something about how that is parallel to the way time can stand still. So it's like an object and this sort of sensation. And so it's just very interesting because, you know, when you think of poetry, you think it's like so the flow and sequential, but in metaphysical poetry, the flow is actually the absence of flow. And the kind of like it's bizarre. It's just very interesting, and I think it has a lot of
deconstructed. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I think it has a lot of relationship to contemporary music, which is so strange because it's such an early art form, but a lot of, you know, contemporary meaning composers now, it's like the world is so chaotic and we can make the relationships between and among things in the world can seem kind of random, but in a way it's all kind of related. And I think that's really cool.
So you're in conservatory for your master's and your undergrad. You decided to go to the Arctic North of Rochester at the Eastman School of Music.
Yeah. I almost died.
I did the same thing. I went to SUNY Potsdam for my undergraduate. Lots of snow, and it was like -20 for half the year.
Yes.
What are some of the lessons you learned in deep in conservatory, doing both your master's and your undergrad, and how has that informed the rest of the beginning of your career?
That's a great question. You know, I was just thinking the other day how much I miss being able to literally walk into my friend's practice room, my colleague's practice room, and for them to walk into my practice room and just be able to play for them. And just be able to be surrounded by these incredible musicians, like literally the young artists of the future who have such different personalities, different ideas, are playing such different, you know, styles of music at the time. And not only just, you know, to be able to put yourself on the spot, which is really important in developing as a performer, but to be able to just take input. And it's just like, you know, at your fingertips. It's incredible. You know, when you do it professionally, it's kind of, I mean, I'm alone practicing a lot of the time. I don't really play for many people. And so I really miss that.
That is an exciting part of being in the conservatory, is that constant interaction with your colleagues. And I've been privileged to have a lot of my colleagues from undergraduate and my master's degree on the show. And it's great to see a couple of them are singing at the Metropolitan Opera lead artists there, and some are becoming
incredible
distinguished educators, and to hear the impact they're having on the field. And I think about us back then as undergraduates, and the connections you make in those places are so important. My younger son wants to be a professional musician, a percussionist and drummer. And I'm like, everyone you're going to meet, remember, they're going to be colleagues someday.
Oh, yes. It's an incredibly, incredibly small world. And it's also, I mean, the other thing I remember about it was that it was just such a bubble. I mean, literally all I was thinking about was practicing, like literally practicing. I mean, I would have, of course, academic work from my, you know, academic degree, and I would have, you know, Eastman was very intensive with theory and history, which was really great. So I would definitely have work for that. But I mean, literally, primarily, I think 85% of my life was spent in a practice. Yeah. And going to the coffee shop, like literally 3 times a day to, you know, catch up with people, and then going back to practice. It was just, I was either there or there. So
it's such a different lifestyle, and but boy, it's through that crucible and that kind of lens that you get to that next level. That the technique becomes automatic and ingrained, and then your stylistic practice and being around great artists. Who were some of your principal teachers?
So when I was, so I, okay, so I started with, I mentioned the piano teacher who was actually an organist as well. Her name was Dr. Karen Bartman. And I just recently told her, Dr. Bartman, you set my hands at the piano, literally, when I was 5 years old, and you set into motion a journey that is continuing that you, probably never thought would happen. But, and then when I was around 11 or 12, I transitioned to this pre-college program where I studied with a professor at the University of Maryland. And he's still a professor at the University of Maryland, as is his wife, who's a wonderful pianist. His name is Mikhail Volchak. Um, and I studied with him throughout my teenage years. And then I, of course, entered the Eastman School of Music, and I studied for both my bachelor's and master's with Natalia Antonova. And she's a force of nature, as anyone who knows her would say. And she really, really formed the artist I am today, the person I am today. I mean, she really taught me everything. And so I studied with her from 2010 to 2016. So that's my bachelor's and master's. And then I moved to New York and I studied maybe for 2 years, I would say, maybe a year and a half to 2 years with Jeffrey Swan, who is an incredible American concert pianist. He actually doesn't teach much. He mostly, has been performing. He really made a mark from, age of 16. And he was, performing ever since. And he is still a wonderful mentor for me.
Isn't
I've been very
amazing
privileged.
how? Sorry, I'm sorry. Let you finish.
No, I said I've been very privileged. Then, of course, master classes are so important for young students. And so in that way, I've been privileged to play for more, pianists and names than I can count. But yeah.
It's amazing how each of the teachers in your life, like I know this from my journey as a conductor, and as each teacher puts something different, and you're ready for different things at different stages, and they're
Absolutely.
so different in what they provide.
Absolutely. It's
And
I feel my teenage years, I feel like Professor Volchak really taught me how to practice, literally how to sit and be just incredibly disciplined. He was a wonderful, patient person, very calm temperament. And that really helped me because when I was a teenager, I was even more all over the place than I am now. I was just completely hyperactive. I mean, I love to be on stage, but I did not practice. Let me just put it that way. And he was like, you need to practice. So, and then, going to Professor Antonova, Miss Antonova, she has such a strong artistic personality. And the amazing thing about that is that she doesn't so much impose that on her students, but she helps them really find their strength. And I mean, she was so wonderfully intense. I mean, I could not look forward every week to my lessons with her. And I think that I have to say, it wasn't until my master's that I really felt comfortable in what I wanted to say and how I wanted to express it. I felt, since my teenage years, I felt technically, it was fine, but to have a really clear conception in your mind is different from being able to execute it with your hands and have it come across to another person. And I feel like with my work with her, it wasn't until my master's that really that began to blossom. So
what are some of the pieces of music that you would say you defined for that period, your master's degree, some of the real accomplishments in the repertoire that you played?
Oh my gosh, I'm having flashbacks. Oh, I feel like she gave me pieces that were way too hard for me at the time and still way too hard for me now. I mean, my master's recital, two big pieces. So one in the first half, one in the second half. The first half was Prokofiev's 8th Sonata, which is just this 30-minute, just for, any audience member, it's basically this 30-minute total. I mean, like, just compared to like a Tolstoy novel, okay? So it's like a Tolstoy novel at the piano. It's the third of his war sonatas, number 6, 7, and 8. And it was my first performance of it then. I have performed it so many times since, and each time is completely different. But that was my first performance. I mean, I go out and I play Prokofiev 8. I was so terrified, but it was a good first performance, thank God. And at the intermission, and then the second half was Schumann's Symphonic Etudes.
Wow.
So which is just so incredibly challenging. I mean, Schumann's music, composers like Prokofiev, Liszt, Rachmaninoff, I mean, they were such great pianists. And I think that's part of why what they wrote was so, it's pianistic, right? It's not so difficult to kind of get your fingers around. Like, it's written for a pianist. I mean, Schumann, Symphonic Etudes, Symphonic, it's written with, this orchestral conception in mind. And it was, it's a difficult piece. But again, it was a good first performance, but that was a very challenging master's program. And I think it really stretched my abilities and improved my abilities, attempting those two massive works. So
What are some of the first pieces you played with orchestra?
with orchestra, the first piece I played was Greek Concerto. Greek Concerto.
I love the Grieg Concerto. It's such a great concerto.
Oh, it's incredible. Mozart C minor 491, which is funny to mention because I recently in 2019, before the whole, or I'm sorry, 2020, before the whole pandemic, in February, I played that with the Brooklyn Metro Chamber Orchestra. And that was wonderful to play that concerto again. I absolutely love it. Ended up playing the Brahms cadenza, which was kind of weird, but maybe next time I'll write my own. I don't know. Another concerto I played.
We certainly have the time these
young
days to write concerti and cadenza.
I know. I really need to take advantage. Right. Another concerto I played was Prokofiev 1, which it's not so often played, which is kind of weird because it's just perfect 20-minute continuous. I feel like it's super easy to program, but I don't know why it's not really played. But that actually really fostered my love of Prokofiev's music. Play a lot of Prokofiev, and I love his musical language. I love his style.
Spiky and rhythmic and driving, yeah.
Just super intense, super intense. I love it.
Is there a certain repertoire that you identify with, so in addition to Prokofiev, that maybe identifies with your personality?
I am working on studying the works of Joseph Hoffman. I am recording them progressively. I've actually recorded 4 thus far, and the 5th is coming out. And he was also an engineer. He was a total polymath. He had a huge interest in math and sciences. It's just totally incredible. So everybody knows he's a legendary pianist, right? Pianists know that he's a legendary pianist. People do not know that he also composed. And his compositions are, I feel like he wrote them for himself to just show off his incredible abilities. And like when you go to YouTube, the only recordings of them are himself playing them or his student, Shura Cherkesky, playing them. But they are so much fun. And they really are helping my technique become more fluid, more flexible. I'm enjoying them so much. He just wrote so many character pieces that are so like audience friendly, they're just short, they're exciting, or they're, short and like super poetic. And I really am enjoying studying his work. So stay tuned for more Hoffman performances.
I love pianists. I love artists who dig into the repertoire. Of course, as a concerto, as a soloist, you'll play the Chopin, you'll play all the great standard repertoire. But it's so interesting to me to watch artists who delve into different composers, different genres, different styles, and draw something new.
No one has performed these works, and it's just, it's interesting. The first one I performed. Okay, so I thought I'm introducing most people to this composer, right? I might as well start with the one piece that everybody knows, which is called Kaleidoscope. It's a 5-minute showpiece. It's really, really beautiful. So I started with that, and then now I'm just like, okay, here's all this other stuff that he's not famous for, but it's really, really cool pieces. And as pianists, as concert pianists, we are really blessed. Concert pianists are really blessed with such a vast repertoire. I think by the time I am 90, God willing, I will not have even touched 5% of the iceberg, like the tip of the iceberg. And that to me is so exciting. It also gives me this like incredible and sometimes uncomfortable sense of urgency. But I want to learn as much as possible. And the great works, like you mentioned, Chopin Concerto, Schumann Concerto also comes to mind. All of these great works are great works for a reason, and they should be performed, and they should be performed over and over and over again. And I never believe it's boring. Each conductor, each soloist has something different to say. But then there's all this other music that also, really, I think deserves to be in the spotlight, to be on stage, literally.
And it sheds light, like the sometimes the lesser known works shed light on the famous ones and puts them in a different perspective. So when you program these pieces, I love to program pieces that nobody knows. Like I did a tone poems concert, and I put unknown Dvorak, the Water Goblins, and I love to discover pieces.
Really, I don't know that piece. That's cool.
It's great music. There's always such great music around there. Even with famous composers, if you dig deep enough, you can find pieces that shed light on his other pieces. You'll hear things that get used often, or you'll hear the development of the style as it's emerging. And I find that I just love to bring that to my audiences, to discuss that with the orchestra. And I love when I ask the orchestra, who's played this piece? And nobody's played it before in a professional orchestra.
Yeah.
My favorite. Like, I win.
That's so interesting that you mentioned. So Joseph Hoffman was a contemporary of Sergei Rachmaninoff. Oh. And it's been famously said that when Rachmaninoff was told, he would always be complimented. I mean, greatest concert pianist of all time. He said, well, there was Hoffman, or there is Hoffman. And so he viewed Hoffman, that's how he viewed Hoffman. And they were at the same time and very much in the same style. I recently recorded Hoffman's Elegy. Rachmaninoff has, of course, his very famous elegy that he wrote rather early in his life. And it's just interesting because it's the same form, and a lot of other composers have written elegies. It's the same form, but it's different, and it just shows, difference in musical personalities. I mean, same style, same time, same form. But no, it's totally enriching, and I find myself making that comparison to Rachmaninoff a lot. I mean, if not because most everybody knows Rachmaninoff and they know his style very well, but they don't know Hoffman. So it helps to have something to sort of, associate that composer with his style, so they can kind of be more encouraged to get to know something different.
Well, we'll have to put a link to one of those recordings in the chat box so people can go check out your
definitely
your performance of this awesome artist. So tell us what it was like. What's it like coming to New York City and coming to the big city after your training, and how did that help you grow into the next chapter of your career?
So I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, so I was no stranger to big cities, Northwest D.C. area. Rochester, as you know, was in the middle of nowhere, and my apartment was literally right next to the school. So it would be like, I wake up, pass by the coffee shop that's like 30 feet away, go into school that's like another 30 feet away, and then the end. that's my life.
Repeat if necessary.
So, and of course, right, and conservatory is supposed to be like that because you're supposed to focus. I mean, you need to build your skills. Coming to New York was super overwhelming. Even though I had grown up, going on the DC Metro, I had, grown up, being around people all the time, especially out and about. It was still super overwhelming because I honestly did not realize how big New York City was. I mean, I think Manhattan, and then it's like Long Island, Brooklyn, Queens. I'm just like, it's crazy. In a way, it's been such a relief to just be at home, honestly. Because I think in the beginning of 2020, I was starting to get a little burned out. I was like, I don't want to take the subway. I don't want to go anywhere today. So it's been nice in a way, with the pandemic, where you can sort of work at your own pace. I think especially for New Yorkers. And I mean, speaking of New Yorkers, I'm so inspired by how resilient, like, a lot of my, fellow city dwellers have been with this pandemic. It's just so inspiring. I mean, there's just such a sense in the city of like, we're in this together and we're all so different. And I think that when I'm in Manhattan, it's just, I meet so many people of so many different cultures, so many different walks of life, so many different, ethnicities, speaking so many different languages, just like in one day. And that to me is really, really inspiring.
Yeah, Manhattan's always been, I've grown up in the shadow of Manhattan my entire life, and it's been really strange during the COVID period. I'm used to being in the city 3 times a week to meet with opera singers and agents to discuss projects, collaborations with other artists and organizations, and make projects happen for 2 or 3 years down the road. I've only been to the city like 3 times since COVID hit, but I've been on lots of conference calls, of course, but it's not the same. And I miss that energy. I miss the people I work with who are so interesting. And every day it's someone totally different whenever I'm in the city. And the artists come from all over the world. And it's such an artistic home. It's amazing how all of the arts come together in Manhattan in such a fascinating and unique way.
Oh, it's the home. The best place, I think, for a lot of collaborations to happen and for a lot of people to learn from each other. which is something that's, I think, very, very important.
So what do you? So now you also have another, like a more recent artistic innovation. Now I've read in your bio that you've been a published model. How did that evolve in your work?
That's interesting. So, since my whole life has been about piano, of course, that also evolved from piano. I had a series of recitals throughout my master's and into moving to New York, where I really just wanted to promote, like, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, like, let's get to know each other, like, I'd love to meet you. And so I didn't really have headshots. I had to go get portraits done, and I think I had a second session where a photographer who was recommended to me by a friend asked me, do you model? And I was kind of like, are you joking? Like, I'm literally 5'2". Like, I don't model. It's funny. My sister actually did some modeling. She's quite tall. But no, I didn't. I didn't do anything. And he was just like, you should really, you would do really well in portraits and editorial. And apparently in those, I didn't know at the time, but apparently not everything is runway. Not everything you have to be like 7 feet tall. And
As I mentioned
like,
before the
okay.
air, I got the opportunity to go backstage. I was coaching a few opera singers, and they were singing on Couture Fashion Week, and I got to go backstage 2 years in a row at Couture Fashion Week and hang out with all the designers and the models. And I'm just sitting there looking at all these. I'm 5'7", looking at all these incredibly tall women everywhere. It was amazing.
Yeah.
But then I'm also like, hold on,
And the
they're wearing
designers are
really
so
tall
incredible.
heels.
I love Couture Fashion Week.
The designers were mostly my height. They're about my height, most of them. It was interesting. I had a great time.
That's wonderful. Yeah, it's again like another beautiful, another artistic world that you can really make to music. But so I met more photographers. I really enjoyed how, I mean, of the photographers I met, and I think this is common for all photographers, just how detail oriented and how precise, and how it's sort of like in a performance where I was, when we were preparing for this call, I was like, finicking with the light and stuff. And I made the comment that, professional photographers, they've been doing this all their life, but they still have to spend so much time, preparing for a shoot. And then the shoot goes by like that. It's like 20 minutes and it's literally 2 hours of preparation time. And it's just like a performance. So there are a lot of similarities, but yeah, I started meeting people. I got some editorial work. Before COVID hit, I was still doing, I think I had maybe a shoot every two weeks. So it's not nearly, equal to my, of course, piano playing, but it's definitely an important part of my life and something that I've really enjoyed. That's been, I guess, pretty recent, past maybe 2 years.
That's really cool how that how things change in your professional career, how you look for new opportunities. I tell my students all the time, and I've always said this, is to give yourself the broadest possible skill set, and because you never know where your life is going to take you in your performing.
Oh yeah.
I started off in one way, and I got into opera, and opera took me one way, and then I got into symphonic, and you never know where life's going to take you between.
You conduct in so many styles. It's just incredible. I didn't know you did pop music too.
I started, the pops has been a recent people started hiring me to do pops music, and I really found I enjoyed it because I like where I play the drums as a hobby, and
Okay.
it's just something I do for fun. I've always my son's a drummer, and my son's is a guitar player, my other son, so we kind of did that around the house, and it was just something I didn't tell anyone. I just did it for fun, but it's
That's
something that
wonderful.
you find something that's different in you, and I love to hear stories of artists kind of expanding their horizons and finding new ways to be expressive, because I think fashion is incredible art. When I see beautiful fashion and with how these designers can like turn
I
this
love
into like
fashion.
and enhance a living person and make it an artistic statement. It's beautiful.
It's so beautiful, and I especially love when there's a kind of theme or a message behind that. Like there's something about light. It's just so artistic. And I've had collaborations where I've been asked, can you introduce this with, a fitting piece of music? I mean, obviously something
Of
like super
course.
short, but just to set the tone. And that's something that I think is super, super important and really ties into something bigger that's also super important, which is programming. I mean, when you're in conservatory, I did not necessarily choose Prokofiev 8. I did not choose Symphonic Etudes. Those were the best pieces for me to stretch my abilities at the time. But now, I mean, unless it's a concerto where, it's like we're asking you to do Grieg, we're asking you to do, Mozart K491, you really come up with your own solo programs. And I think it's an important skill to be able to know what your strengths are. That's number one. and be able to adapt to various audiences, various venues, various concert directors. I mean, really, it's like it might be a solo concert, but it's still a collaboration because, the director has his vision and the audience has what they want to see, their vision. So it's definitely really important to be adaptable. That's something that I think I've learned in the past few years, and something that's really helped me.
And even BC, before COVID, being adaptable was very important in the last couple of years in my career as well as a conductor. I think the audiences want to see certain things, and the trends are going that direction. But in COVID, I think and after COVID, I think being adaptable is going to be a hugely important skill set.
Oh, absolutely. Especially, I mean, I think as we were talking with the technology, I would say that I became much more active on social media at the beginning of 2020. And of course, throughout the pandemic, I've been very active on social media. But in terms of pure technology, in terms of doing something like this, running a podcast, I mean, those are skills that I want to learn. Tech skills, recording myself professionally and not just, for social media, recording just audio. I mean, those are all things that I think musicians are going to start to have to become familiar with just because of the nature of what's going on. So
yeah, I think that you see there's so many stories of it. I started this podcast just as a discussion with my colleagues and friends just to see how they were doing, how they were handling COVID, how they were, because we're not getting paid doesn't mean we stop being artists. Of course, we're still creative people. That's just what we do. That's how we live. And to see how my artistic colleagues were finding that outlet is just fascinating to me. And so how have you, what innovations have you and what discoveries have you made during this period about yourself?
About myself. Interesting. Well, I think there's nothing that will make me stop playing the piano. That's number one.
We've discovered that.
Yeah. I think that, well, it's interesting, because performing is such an incentive, right? We don't practice just to practice, we practice to perform. And I realized, okay, when I don't have a performance, it's kind of liberating because I realized, well, I actually love to just go to the piano every day. So it's like something I love to do, something that if I don't play a concert again till I'm 30 or till I'm 35, I mean, I will still play piano every day. I will still love it. But it's also been liberating, more practically speaking, in that when you have a program, I mean, the amount of work that goes into 70-minute recital or even just a single concerto is just so unbelievable. And these days, I feel like I spend 3 hours on one page of music. I am literally practicing one piece, maybe two pieces at a time, other than, just maybe refreshing some old pieces, reading some new pieces I want to work on. In terms of like really practicing, I'm really focused. And I think that's so incredible because there's no limit to how deep you can get in a score. And there's no limit to how much you can discover. And I think it's a really important skill to, whenever you see a piece of music, even something you've been playing since you were 6 years old, you can just see something new and, rediscover it again. And I think the pandemic has given me that freedom to really fall in love with the instrument again, outside of, just career, for doing it professionally, whatever.
I have a concert on X date. I need to be ready by this date. But there's nothing like having that deadline to force us to really to have the deadlines necessary. And it's been interesting to find the motivation for me too. I'm used to having I have a desk where I do all my studying, and I've got a stack of music, operas and symphonies that I have to conduct by these dates, and then I have another stack of music that I want to program for the next season or 2 seasons down the road. Yeah. It's kind of a wish list, and I kind of pick A and B and I haven't had anything on my conducting stack because it's all been shelved. I put everything back away, and now I'm starting right now to start thinking about that stack again, start pulling things out and putting them on I want to program these again. So it's been hard to find that time to sit down and open up a score and really just take apart the music. But it comes and it goes.
Yeah, I think
we have our first question from the audience. This is Meredith from San Francisco asks, what do you working on right now? What pieces, what selections?
So right now, so I mentioned the next Hoffman file. I call this like the Hoffman files. It's also an original interview series, by the way. So I'm going to give everybody my socials at the end of the podcast. Absolutely. And you guys can, because I'm announcing it tomorrow, so you guys can follow me on socials, and then you got the announcement. Anyway, sorry, Meredith, your question. So it is a work of Hoffman that I am recording. It will be, well, I'm recording it the first week of February, but it'll be released the second week of February. And it's called The Sanctuary. And I'm actually not sure why it's called The Sanctuary, because it sounds like water. It's very fluid. It's very beautiful. It's very bombastic in the middle, and it kind of like comes and goes like a sweep. And it's so much fun. It's a miniature. It's about 2.5 minutes. And I think it's going to be, I think people are really, really going to like it, because it's never really been performed other than by Hoffman himself. And it's just super fun. Like I really love character pieces. So that's what I'm working on, Meredith, and I hope you'll listen to the recording.
One more question from the audience. This is Laura from New Jersey. And do you also compose music, or have you composed music?
I don't compose original music yet. I've been asked that several times, and it's kind of been why I'm thinking of writing my own cadenza. As I mentioned, with the Mozart I played in February 2020, I played Brahms' cadenza, but I had a friend be like, write your own cadenza. And I'm kind of interested to learn more, not only to compose, but how to improvise. I think that would be a really valuable skill. So not currently, but perhaps in future.
We're getting a flood of great questions here. This is kind of fun.
This is exciting.
Leo wants to know, in your opinion, who is the greatest piano virtuoso of all time, and a composer of your favorite composer? So this is like asking me which of my children is my favorite, but give us a few.
Oh my gosh, how can I choose? When people ask me this, I'm like, are you actually asking me this? Like, please ask. Like, okay, it's fine. It's a good question. Leo?
Give us your top 5.
Okay, top
Leo.
5. Top 5 composers. Prokofiev, Liszt, Rachmaninoff. Chopin is too hard, but I love him. And okay, so Prokofiev, Rachmaninoff, Liszt, Chopin. You're killing me. I have too many choices. I'm literally just blurting out. 5th, Joseph Hoffman.
Okay, very nice. Round that off with a more interesting name.
Yes. So, but thanks for that question.
That's a great one. Yeah, it's hard to decide where do you put Beethoven and all that, and where do you put all these other great artists.
Now that I'm thinking about it, I tend to like composers that are also pianists. So, I guess from that list, Chopin was a pianist as well.
So if I turn that question around to something interesting, that was an interesting question to start with, but let's turn that around and say, if you could have lunch or dinner with one pianist of all time, who would it be and why? I feel like I'm on a job interview.
God, that's hard. So one living pianist or one dead
That's
pianist?
up to you. That's up to you.
Ugh. We might have to come back to that.
Okay, for me it would be, if I can say one artist, I want to sit down and have a beer with Beethoven. I want to sit there and say, talk about the symphony, so just have a conversation about life. I couldn't imagine what that would be like.
I think Bach, actually. I don't really play much Bach. It's interesting. I don't play much Bach, but I think he's the classical composer I listen to the most. I would want to ask him about the art of fugue, especially some of his more...
What an incredible work that is. Just encyclopedic, incredible work.
I've looked at it. I have not played it, but I hope to touch it someday.
Leo followed up his question. Leo Kresci says he suggests Maurice Ravel, and he wants to know if you played Gaspard de la Nuit.
I have studied Gaspard de la Nuit. I have not performed it yet. I was actually supposed to perform it in 2020, and I'm very happy that I have more time to work on it, because it's a very difficult, but very rewarding. It's interesting. I mean, it sounds like it would be, technically challenging. It's not the notes that are difficult. It's the touch, and it's the pedal. And it's adjusting that touch and that pedaling to different pianos, which is definitely, you have to have a huge conception of what you'd like. So hopefully in 2021 that performance will happen. But I love that work. Thank you so much for mentioning it.
So describe that for non-professional concert pianists who are listening. What's it like showing up at a concert venue that you haven't played on before, the new instrument, and having to, what's the process like for you for getting to become one with a new instrument?
So that's something, I mean, so you practice, of course, you practice, right? You prepare the music, you study the music in depth, you know exactly what you want, exactly what you're doing. But in terms of getting used to pianos, that's something you also have to practice. And in the beginning, it gets easier and easier. A lot of times I have the opportunity to warm up, even if it's just the day of, and that's naturally, as you would expect, a huge help. But in the cases that I don't, I mean, you sit down, you have such, you can feel at your fingertips the sound that you want to produce, and then you just go. And it's something about the instinct, or something about, I mean, the harder you practice, the more you study, the more you know exactly what you're doing, the more you'll have control over whatever instrument that you're playing on. And oh, you know, of course, not every concert I'm gonna play on this, you know, magnificent Steinway. And of course, you can say objectively some instruments are better than others, but at the same time, I really think as a pianist, you need to be able to make music out of any instrument. Um, I think that's a really, that's something very important. I mean, you need to be able to have your message and to be able to communicate what you want to communicate with whatever you're given. And that takes a lifetime. I really do think that takes a lifetime.
Yeah, certainly an art to making that instrument come alive, no matter what, you know, with the touch. And thank you for sharing that. Have you thought about your desert island composer? You staying with Bach?
You know, I think I'm staying with Bach.
Okay.
I think I need to talk. I haven't talked enough about Bach. I haven't given Bach the credit that he deserves in my life lately. So I'm gonna say Bach.
It's amazing all these great artists, how they all come back to Bach. They all mention him. Most of them will go back and say they have to re-engage with the old masters, as even though they're reinventing, like Liszt reinventing piano technique, you know, and Beethoven
Yes.
reinventing piano technique. But their love of the great masters is always kind of there. It's like that. We always build on the shoulders of giants.
Chopin was hugely influenced by Bach, and you hear that so much in a lot of his more contrapuntal writing. It's really incredible. Um, and I wouldn't say it's an entirely different harmonic language either. It's really, it's, yes, that's something actually that's very interesting to me. Just through time, how composers just, it's like an active conversation with each other. Um, the kind of exchange that you can always find more about and learn more about.
It's also amazing how artists who are like your teachers you study with pass that knowledge on to you, and they have the direct lineage. If you take the lineage from your teacher, you know, for my conducting, my mentor was a famous Verismo conductor, and he also worked for the NBC Radio Symphony, where he met and worked a little bit with Toscanini, who premiered La Boheme.
Wow.
So the more you go back in the lineage, I know you can get all the way back. It's amazing how that gets passed down to us through these great composers and artists.
Absolutely.
We have another question from Laura. Who's your favorite Liszt? What's your favorite Liszt composition?
Oh, great question. And a hard question.
So much to
Of
choose
course, for
from.
piano. I'm assuming that's for piano, Laura.
That's up to you.
Not. I mean, most of what he wrote was piano. I really like the second concerto. I've played the second concerto. It's not nearly as often performed as the first. I firmly believe it will make a comeback. Can I actually say another piece? So that's with orchestra, of course. I love the B minor sonata. The B minor sonata, he wrote two piano sonatas technically. I've played the Dante sonata, which is a little bit shorter, inspired by it's just, you know, Dante's Inferno, Divine Comedy, and the B minor sonata is more lengthy, less programmatic, and it's definitely, I've played the Dante sonata. The B minor sonata I have not played, but it's definitely something I want to make a statement with at some point in my life.
He is such a fascinating person. I mean, of course, being one of the greatest piano virtuosos and reinventing piano technique in his lifetime, Liszt also invented the tone poem. He wrote the first tone poem.
Yes.
The guy was incredible, and he was also an amazing person. I mean, just a real dynamic.
Yeah, I was just gonna say he was also such a generous human being, and that's just as inspiring as the rest to me. I mean, he was so giving with his knowledge, and as pianists, it's really interesting to listen to how his students played. I had a friend send me, okay, so I played his Hungarian Rhapsody number 12. That was my first Hungarian Rhapsody. I had a friend send me the recording of one of his students playing that. It was crazy. I mean, he was like improvising. He was kind of like skipping some parts. I mean, it was as if he was taking the score, like it's not supposed to be played as is, and it's just, what do you call it? Like a skeleton? I mean, maybe
A
more than
lead
a
sheet.
skeleton.
Yeah, a kind of
Yeah. I
guide, a lead sheet.
mean,
Yeah.
just the
Wow.
tradition of that time. I feel like now, I mean, I know when I played it, I felt completely boxed off, like slow practicing all the trills, making sure it makes sense together, everything totally planned. But after listening to that, I was like, whoa, there's, so much more I can do off the page. Maybe I'll revisit it.
Yeah, it's interesting when we consider performance practice, we can go back a certain point, but we can't go back all the way. That's why, especially before 1900 or 18, even the late 1800s, there's a couple of recordings.
Yeah.
But like to hear the tempi, even in our lifetimes, or even going back to the 1920s, it's amazing how the tempos have changed so much, and the idea of performance practice has changed.
Absolutely. That's very interesting, especially to think about that from your perspective. As a conductor, I mean, a lot of my editions, even the original urtext editions, they have metronome markings, and many of them are much faster or much slower than how most pianists play. Same when you listen to composers playing their own works. I mean, Prokofiev composed, his toccata, Opus 11. It's an Italian word that means touch, and it's supposed to be kind of a very rhythmic, very energetic, very driven genre. You can also listen to Schumann's toccata, but when you listen to his performance of his own toccata, Prokofiev, it's so slow, and it's strange. I mean, his conception of it, I don't know. I mean, everybody plays it so fast. I would play it fast. I don't play it yet, but yeah, you never know. I mean, there's just so much room for freedom. There's so much room for interpretation that, as I said, even the Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, it will be different every time, and we should keep performing it all the time. It needs to still be performed after the COVID pandemic, and all of these works are great for a reason, as I said.
Isn't it amazing how, every generation that comes brings something new to a piece of work that goes back so far? And that's what kind of unites us all, even though they're slightly different. And I love taking metronome markings to different recordings and seeing they're so incredibly different. The whole idea behind the pieces change, the philosophy behind the way it's conducted, or the thought process. That's for me as a conductor, my favorite thing in the world is to sit there with a score until I have opinions on everything, till I know why I think he did that. Like, why was the harmony changed there? Why is this 4-bar and a 2-bar phrase? Because you always have to dig down to that level. That's the part I love, is making those discoveries.
Absolutely, and it never ends, and it's different every time. That's the magic of it.
That's the fun, I never get. It's music is such a broad field, and changing pieces changes everything. And incorporating new composers, discovering new collaborations, new orchestrations. It's a limitless field.
It's incredible, so incredible.
So
we are truly.
I'm sorry, finish.
Oh no, I just said we are truly blessed. Like, we're very privileged to be able to touch this great music, and keep discovering and keep creating.
Now, you're someone with an extremely active mind and intellect. What is your next chapter going to be when things start to open up again? What are your hopes, and what's your next chapter going to look like if you could write the page today?
If I could write the page today. Okay, so I mentioned my interview series called The Hoffman Files. So I was so inspired by Joseph Hoffman and the fact that not only was he such a legendary pianist, but that he was a polymath, and he was so inventive. Literally, he had patented inventions. And so I wanted to create an interview series and interview pianists, basically my fellow colleagues. Some of them are very much longtime friends, and interview pianists who do other things than play the piano. So that's not necessarily non-musical. So pianists, and this project is releasing tomorrow. So pianists who transcribe, pianists who compose, pianists who dance, who have, ballet background, pianists who do video. And then of course, all of these pianists play at a professional level, but it's turning into just other musical subjects to fields beyond pianists who are mathematicians. It's just totally incredible. And so my desire, to go back to your question, my desire is to not only really play piano to play piano, but to play piano to make it absolutely relevant to society, to put classical music at the center of society and have it serve other walks of life, other fields, everything. Because I think oftentimes we feel like classical music, and especially, piano playing, is so removed, and we're knocking on the door of society like, okay, let us stay relevant. But I think we just need to put ourselves in the center and be like, it is relevant, and that's it. It is.
My thing is,
also,
never let it become a museum piece. It's not a museum piece. It's a living, breathing art form made by interesting and fascinating people like yourself.
I've been learning so much, honestly, doing this series from my colleagues. It's just so incredible. I mean, there's so much, music, having talent in music and doing music is not just about having musical talent. I mean, we can do so much with our skills. The skills that it takes to become a musician, the skills that it takes to be an artist, to be creative, can be applied to so many areas in life. And that's really what I'm trying to shed light on with this series. So, and then of course in my own performing, becoming.
So I hear you have a new exciting announcement tomorrow. In addition to your series being released, don't you have a new website premiering? Didn't I hear that as well?
I have a new website. Thank you for remembering to mention it. I have a new website. So if you follow me on social media, that announcement with the URL will be up tomorrow around noon. And the good thing about it is that if you're really interested in reading about, all of these amazing people that I'm so privileged to interview, you can find that in the blog. So that's the blog section of my website. And the first interview, there's going to be an interview every week, and the first one is next Friday. So the project announcement is tomorrow. And if you're interested in learning more about me specifically, of course, please visit my website, watch my videos, and I hope we can connect on social media and all of that fun stuff. So thank you for mentioning.
You've built quite an impressive following on Instagram. I'm relatively new to that platform, but congratulations. And I wish you just continued success as we open up that next chapter, as we get back on the stage. And I hope that all the innovations and the discoveries you made during this period, deepen your love of what you do. And I can't wait to collaborate with you one of these days.
Thank you. Oh, likewise. It would be a pleasure and an honor. Thank you. And yes, I think we will all come out of this wiser and ultimately more fulfilled. I think we will realize how much this all means to me, and we will find a way to keep that going. So
even when you're in career and you're running around, like for me, as I teach and I do guest conducting frequently, and I have rehearsals Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, and I travel. We get so busy in our schedule that we lose
Absolutely.
how blessed we are, like you said, and lucky and to serve the music and to be a part of that. And I don't miss a single rehearsal. If I was tired, I don't miss a single moment rehearsing coaching singers or putting a piano touches on an opera. I miss every second of that these days.
We took a lot for granted, I think. I mean, not we, but I think us in general as artists, as musicians, now that I'm less busy, I kind of realize the experiences that I've had, and it's made me much more grateful and feel like this is something that's gonna move forward. And because I love it so much, I'm gonna find a way, despite of course all the innumerable challenges in our world today, especially as artists. I think that artists are by definition resilient people, and I think that we are the ones who will most find a way forward. So I think that is the perspective I would take.
Well, words of wisdom from a dynamic performer who is, when we open up, going to be all over the world on concertizing. And thank you so much to Maryam Raya for joining us on Music Matters.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fabulous to speak, and thank you so much to our viewers. So it was a pleasure.
All the best. Thank you for joining us on Music Matters with Jason Tramm. Please remember to subscribe to us and smash that bell icon for the most up-to-date information on upcoming guests and topics. We really appreciate you liking and sharing our videos. It makes a big difference, and as we grow, and we have some exciting guests coming up. This Sunday, we have a Latin Grammy Award winner, Manny Cepeda, who is a very renowned California salsa band leader and percussionist who will be on our show. And I hope you can join us, and thank you so much. And remember, keep music alive.